A couple weeks ago, I beat Tears of the Kingdom without ever using Ultrahand, but that was only possible because of the Fuse ability, which gave me plenty of other ways to gain height, deal damage, and travel the world. Then Raphael Montserrat gave me this absolutely amazing, insane, painful idea. What if I don't use either of them? Today, I'm upping the ante to find out. Is it possible to beat The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom without Ultrahand or Fuse? For further context, I recommend watching the other challenge first, as I'll gloss over important techniques and information that I covered in that one. The rules are as follows. 1. I can't pick up or attach objects to each other with Ultrahand. 2. I can't use the Fuse ability to attach items to my weapons, shields, or arrows. 3. I can't use glitches. And 4. I can't use amiibos. The challenge is complete when the credits roll. Let's take a look at how these restrictions affect the playthrough. Without Ultrahand, Zonai devices lose most of their value because I can't build any structures or machines. More importantly, I'm prevented from completing the Zora, Rito, and Gerudo questlines, leaving only the Goron Quest to remove a boss from the final boss rush and get Yunobo's Sage ability. Without Fuse, combat becomes much more difficult, because weapons deal less damage, break more easily, and lose access to elemental effects. I can't use homing arrows or compensate for low-level gear by attaching high-damage components, but the real complication comes from being locked out of movement techniques that were vital for the no Ultrahand run, such as the wing shield jump, the bomb jump, and the rocket shield. This is extremely rough, and makes the whole game much more difficult, as is the point of a challenge run. However, it's worth noting that just because I can't fuse items myself, I'm not entirely unable to get fused items. That's because the ability is less something that's unique to Link and the Zonai, and more something that the entire Kingdom of Hyrule has already figured out how to do without much trouble. Even the monsters are carrying around fused weapons. Great job making this new ability feel special, Nintendo. The result of all this is that I can take fused items from defeated enemies, as well as find them in chests or lying around the world. So when you see footage of me using fused items, that's how I got them. However, I still can't fuse arrows, and it's not possible to obtain a wing, bomb, or rocket shield. Plus, items fused by default tend to be less than spectacular, but they're still extremely helpful because the base weapons in this game are nearly worthless. Before we get started, please remember to like the video if you enjoy it, dislike the video if you hate it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment with any feedback or ideas. With all that out of the way, let's move on to the tutorial. Last time I used Fuse shields to beat the Ultrahand shrine, but now I needed to find a way to beat the Fuse and Ultrahand shrines with only items, because Ascend is completely useless in both of them. Before any shrines though, I kidnapped some frogs from their home in a nearby pond. Then I completed the Ascend shrine because taking that route around the Great Sky Island allowed me to collect the bomb flowers found in the bottomless cave. While I lose access to bomb arrows and bomb shields in this run, bomb flowers are still incredibly valuable because they represent my only method of manipulating large objects. Thrown bombs also do a lot of damage and are great for crowd control. Plus, I do get access to the poor man's bomb arrow by dropping one, running away, and then detonating it with a shot. After collecting bombs, I was as ready as I'd ever be to take on the Fuse and Ultrahand shrines. Fuse is easy enough. Throwing a bomb breaks the first barrier, and throwing a fire fruit works just as well for getting the key as fusing it to an arrow does. Another bomb could destroy the final barrier, but in order to conserve them, I defeated the enemy and used its weapon instead. Now I was headed for the Ultrahand shrine, but on the way I cooked up those frogs to make a delicious Speed 3 potion. And now it's time for what you've been wondering about since the beginning. How on earth can I beat the Ultrahand shrine without Ultrahand or Fuse? Well, it looks a little something like this. I used the elixir to run up and jump over the gap, then a bomb to launch myself with this hook. Okay, perhaps not. Hypothetically, this method could work, but I was never able to do it. Maybe it's time to change tactics. A couple bomb flowers will knock this chest down, and now we... fair warning, this could take a little while. Here, I'll speed it up for you. This is what beating the Ultrahand shrine without Fuse or Ultrahand actually looks like. Beating this took me 3 hours! If that's not worth liking and subscribing, I seriously don't know what is. But I did it! I've proven that it's possible to escape the Great Sky Island without using Fuse or Ultrahand once. After getting recall and beating the last shrine, I fell to Hyrule proper and got the paraglider. Now the game has really opened up, and it's just a matter of becoming powerful enough to defeat the final bosses. Before anything else, I headed straight for the Goron Quest. Along the way, I fought some enemies and found some shrines, but we'll get to those later. Turns out that rock like-likes are super easy to beat with Rewind, and stealing fruit from Bokoblin archers is an efficient way to access elemental attacks, so I did that a lot in this challenge. When I got to Goron City, I found I couldn't advance the quest very far without the Flamebreaker armor, so I got sidetracked gathering enough materials to buy it and eventually went all the way around Death Mountain, because I have the attention span of a highly caffeinated squirrel. Fighting enemies during this section helped me get a feel for combat in this challenge, and because of my absurdly low damage output, enemies become much more spongy. I died. A lot. But the save system ensured that I never lost any significant progress, allowing me to attempt difficult fights over and over. Even though I couldn't make elemental arrows, bows remained the greatest weapon in my arsenal throughout this run, with their high durability, long range, and solid damage output. Plus, headshotting enemies takes them out of the fight for a short while, allowing me to focus on their comrades. Even without fused melee weapons, a one-on-one fight against a standard enemy is hardly ever a problem. Stealth is also more useful than normal. It gives me the option of stealing a bunch of weapons from a camp without worrying about the monsters who own them, as well as taking a large chunk of health off one of the enemies before the battle even starts. Overall, combat operates about how you'd expect in this challenge. It's harder with a bunch of options gone, but it's a fun difficulty spike that forced me to engage with different mechanics instead of just running and screaming. Although I did still do that a lot. A couple of highlights include a Bokoblin with bomb flowers blowing up its own battle talus, and catching a star fragment while skydiving. Once I sold Beetle a bunch of gemstones that I'd found, I had 700 rupees, which was just enough to buy the Flamebreaker armor and continue the Goron Quest line. After discovering what the point of the mask is, it was time for the boss fight against Miragia on top of Death Mountain. I used Yunobo's charge attack to unstick the powered glider, which was quite exasperating because it kept flipping upside down, but I got it to work eventually. The fight is an absolute cakewalk by default and nothing changes here. At the Fire Temple, I rang the gongs in a different order than last time. Getting around was a bit trickier without access to rocket shields, but still totally possible with just ascend, gliding, and some patient climbing. I was a bit worried about the boss as my weapons were not exactly high tier, but it turned out that getting hit by accident at the beginning of fight was actually a genius strategy. I hadn't realized it, but this weapon I'd picked up from a Bokoblin hours earlier included Desperate Strength, so being one hit away from death doubled my damage output. It wasn't much trouble to beat the boss, gaining me a heart container and Yunobo's Sage ability. But those of you who noticed this black Moblin sword that appeared in my inventory probably don't care about that. How is that possible? Am I breaking the rules of this challenge? Don't you worry, dear viewer, I wouldn't dream of cheating. Well, that's not true. I can't control what I dream about. Look, I just meant that I wouldn't actually cheat, okay? You've just gotta trust me, because I am not going to put all 21 hours of this run on YouTube. My computer would die trying to export that video file. So then how did I get the weapon? We never directly see monsters or humans sticking rocks on the end of their clubs, and a monster horn doesn't just spawn naturally. Guardian constructs are an exception though. They can fuse the objects around them, a mechanic that is tutorialized all the way back in the Fuse Shrine. Where else? So when I ran into one in the Fire Temple, I decided to try something a little crazy. After throwing away nearby Zonai devices it was trying to use, dropping the most powerful monster horn I had, and prepping Yunobo's charge attack so he wouldn't interrupt things, the construct fused the Moblin horn to his existing weapon. Right after this happened, I was really happy, and then immediately suffered a bit of a crisis. To me, manipulating this really felt contrary to the spirit of the challenge. These weapons are being fused right in front of me, after all, even if I'm not the one doing it. Finding them in chests or stealing from enemies feels incidental rather than intentional, so I decided not to use this mechanic at all for the rest of the run. However, I did eventually use this weapon to beat the Silver Lionel in the endgame enemy gauntlet, but it's safe to say that this mechanic was not integral to the outcome of this run. Shrines present a unique roadblock in this challenge. There are tons of ways to traverse the open world, fight enemies, and collect materials. Shrines, however, are mostly themed around the Ultrahand ability and designed with specific solutions in mind. I need to upgrade my health to offset my mediocre damage output in the final battle, and every new heart requires 4 shrines. If you watched my previous video, you'll know about all the ways I cheesed shrines with Fuse because wing shields, bomb jumps, and rocket shields help immensely when scaling walls and crossing gaps. Without these items though, there's no consistent way to gain height in shrines beyond simply jumping. Ascend works, obviously, but only shrines built around it have that as an option. When starting this challenge, I planned to create updrafts that I could ride with my paraglider, but for whatever reason, Nintendo removed that possibility. The good news is that after the first 4 in the tutorial, no shrines are required, which meant I could pick and choose whichever ones were possible. Throughout the course of this challenge, I beat 32 shrines beyond the initial tutorial. The names you see on screen right now are the combat and tutorial shrines that don't require runes, or use basically the same strategy as last time. Go watch my previous video for more information about those. A Precise Strike, Kamatuka's Shrine. I'm not sure what the intended solution is, but a couple bomb flowers will knock the activator ball into the goal no problem. Jump the Gap's Rene's Shrine requires large activator balls to be launched across a gap into the goal. Last time I skipped the first puzzle, but here I was forced to find a way to complete it. 1 bomb isn't enough to get it past the stopper, but 2 is more than enough. Seriously, it's too much because the ball goes sailing right over the goal. Recalling it allows me to drop it in though, and the second section can be completed in the same way as last time. A spinning device, Sasuyai Shrine. Instead of bomb jumping over this section of spinning floor, I used the Speed 3 potion. The next door can be opened with recall, but the final gap posed a bit of a problem. I couldn't get enough height to shield surf on the railings, and I couldn't use fuse shields to cross like last time. Luckily, this platform can slide along the rails, and throwing a bomb will push it to the end. Once it came back, I hopped on and used recall to beat the shrine. A windy device, Ishidag Shrine. I crossed the first 2 obstacles more or less the same way as last time, but needed another way to overcome this final wall. First, I tried using bomb flowers to boost this platform up while I stood on it, which worked great. Then I remembered that I had the ability to rewind objects in time, so using a bomb before standing on this platform worked fine. A fixed device, Meichin Shrine. Last video, I referred to this as probably impossible to beat without Ultrahand, and about 1 billion people in the comments let me know that I'm stupid, and it's actually super easy. All that's necessary is throwing a bomb at this target, which opens the door to the end. Wheeled Wonders, Murakaguk Shrine. The first gap intends for the player to extend this bridge using Ultrahand. It's easily crossed with fused shields, but without them I needed to engage in some physics shenanigans. Placing a few bomb flowers in this little area under the bridge, then detonating them makes the bridge fly upwards. It took me a few tries to get it right, but recalling the bridge gave me enough upward momentum to jump across the gap. I rode the pre-built car partway across the lava pool and jumped over the rest, and while it's difficult, the same thing can be done for the second, larger lava pool. Then I ascended through this platform and knocked these metal balls onto the pressure plate to finish the shrine. A prone pathway, Demizuin's Shrine. There aren't any items to grab or fuse in here, so I beat it with the intended solution of rotating the large hollow box and ascending to the goal. Built for rails, Jiakum Shrine. The first and second rails can be easily shield surfed across, but the third one slopes upward at the beginning. Luckily, shields will magnetize to railings, allowing me to repeatedly jump and surf to gain a bit of distance. Once I got far enough, I jumped to the later portion and surfed to the end. Deep Force Jonsao Shrine is another target-based shrine, so throwing bombs got me past the first and second obstacles. At the end, I threw a fire fruit at the piece of wood holding up this platform, then used recall on it to scale the last wall. The Power of Water, Mogawak Shrine. While blasting this platform up with bomb arrows could work, I found a cheaper solution by throwing a single bomb to charge up this battery. It wasn't full, but it had enough juice to lift me to the end. Mid-Air Perch, Ihan Ah Shrine. Ascending through an anti-gravity platform got me up the first wall, and jumping from the top of this climbable slab can cross the first gap. My singular shield spring obtained from the Kamizun Shrine allowed me to beat the third obstacle, and recalling this platform after it knocked me off was enough to get both myself and the activator ball across. Raru's Blessing, Natak Shrine, wants us to use Ultrahand to rotate this sphere so the crystal can be launched out. Luckily, it's a physics object. I couldn't find a way to move it consistently until I tried shooting it with a bow, which shifts it ever so slightly. 3 broken bows and a whole lot of arrows later, I'd rotated it enough to launch the crystal out. Long or wide, Utsushok Shrine. Requires us to move activator balls along railings in order to open doors. It's finicky, but 1 bomb flower will work for the first, and 2 are needed for the second. Luckily, all I needed for the final area was to shield surf across. Building Bridges Joju Shrine has a hilarious name. It also turns the first challenge of Murakaguk up to 11, requiring 3 bridges to be built with Ultrahand. This time I figured out that Link is launched much further if he's standing on the bridge when it explodes, rather than rewinding afterward. I skipped the first 2 gaps with 3 bombs and a lucky launch, and needed another 3 bombs for the last one. When I felt I'd finished enough shrines and gathered enough materials to be ready for the final gauntlet, it was time to prepare. I cooked all my Sundelions into gloom healing food and killed the silver Lionel for its bow, which is by far the most important piece of equipment I brought into the battle. Last time the final boss rush went basically normal, because Ultrahand is pretty much useless. Fuse, on the other hand, is very important. It allows you to upgrade the weapon drops, giving them enough durability to last through all the bosses. Unfused weapons deal absolutely pitiful damage to these large health bars, so an opening to attack doesn't exactly mean much. Plus, fused arrows are the intended method for dealing with a fair number of bosses, specifically Muktarok and Queen Gibdo. This makes the whole fight really annoying, refreshingly difficult. First up is the Demon King's army, no matter how many of the main quests were completed. Wave 1 is Bokoblins, Wave 2 is Lizalfos, Wave 3 is Gibdos, and Wave 4 is Moblins. My preferred strategy for this fight was tactically retreating, known to some as running away. Speed potions facilitated this, and once I was close enough, I would pick off the Boko archers and headshot any that were too close. When I was forced into melee combat, the flame emitter shield found in the bottomless cave on the Great Sky Island, combined with a topaz rod, did a great job of stopping nearby enemies, as a hit from either would temporarily freeze them in place. Throughout the fight, I continually hit the boss Bokoblin with Muddle Buds to keep him away and help me clear out the enemies. I made sure to grab any dropped arrows, weapons, and shields I saw to stock up for the rest of the fights. A similar strategy works for the rest of the waves with minor adjustments as necessary. The Lizalfos are fast, which made them a bit trickier to shoot, and the Gibdos needed to be hit with a fire fruit before I could damage them. Overall though, this is the second easiest boss of the rush, with the actual easiest being Colgera. Fusing wings or eyes to arrows would make this slightly easier, but nothing really changes here. 12 well-placed arrows are all that's needed, and bullet time makes that pretty simple. Muktarok is a slippery little beast that forced me to start using the most powerful tool I had access to in this fight, the triple-shot Lionel bow. Seriously, I don't know if I would have been able to get through the boss rush without this thing. Because my melee weapons sucked, and throwing stuff does hardly any damage, it was the only decent way to whittle down boss health bars. You're meant to shoot splash fruit to break its shark form, but throwing them can work too. At first I was about as good at that as Ajiao Numa is at hunting birds without homing arrows, but eventually I figured out to aim in front of it, to hit it twice in a row, and make sure it was traveling parallel to me so it didn't turn on a dime and make me miss. Muktarok's second phase has two notable differences from the first. The ground gets covered in muck, and he swim jumps away once you destroy the shark, which is very hard to catch up with because of the muck. Working around it is frustrating but very possible. In order to hit it afterward, I created an updraft with a spicy pepper in order to snipe it with bullet time. While Muktarok is annoying, Queen Gibdo is definitely the hardest in this challenge. The first phase isn't too bad, but she gains the ability to fly once half her health is gone, and bringing her down is a bit of an issue. She's too far away to hit with thrown items, and critical arrow shots do hardly anything. I was stumped for a while here, and all the extra Gibdos running around made it harder to position myself well. But finally, I remembered that spicy peppers can create an updraft, and started using them to fly on top of the Gibdo spawners. From here, I was out of range of most attacks, and it's much easier to hit Queen Gibdo with thrown items, although she can still dodge. Hitting her with a bomb or fire fruit, then coming down to deal damage is the repeatable strategy I used to win the battle. After this, I put the Savage Lionel bow away to save its durability for the Ganondorf fight. The Seized construct isn't too difficult as long as you've conserved enough melee weapons from the previous fights. Throwing fire fruits will stun it, allowing you to stagger it and knock it into the edge of the arena. Phase 2 doesn't require a change of strategy, thankfully. Despite its relatively low difficulty, a couple of my runs ended here in the dumbest ways. The first time I got here, I didn't have enough weapons or arrows, so I reloaded my save and bought more. The second time, I accidentally fused a fire fruit while trying to switch bows, which forced me to reload to maintain the integrity of the challenge. Yes, I'm an idiot, and after multiple hours of attempts, this was especially painful. Eventually though, I succeeded and moved on to face the final boss of the boss rush, Phantom Ganon. Time to bring out the old runaway tactical retreat strategy. They move slowly, so it's not hard to get multiple headshots from a distance. The best part is that they drop their weapons, allowing me to stock up on gloom swords and spears for the final Ganondorf fight. These things have the highest base damage in the game, and while they're a lot better if you fuse them to other weapons, which prevents them from draining your health, they're still vital for the final fight. Throughout all of this, Yunobo is an invaluable asset. The dude's voice might be ear-bleedingly annoying, but he makes these final fights a lot easier by distracting enemies and providing a long-range AoE attack. I shudder to think how long the boss rush would have taken without him, so congratulations, Yunobo. Here is your reward for being my friend. Don't spend it all in one place. All that remained was the final fight against Ganondorf, where my Lionel bow finally gave up. While it was far from perfect, I once again had enough healing items to get me through first try. Defeating the Ganon Dragon is super easy, and once I caught Zelda, the game was finished. So that's it. I've beaten Tears of the Kingdom and 36 of its shrines without using Ultrahand or Fuse, its two most powerful abilities. I think it's pretty clear what comes next, beating the game without using any runes at all. How will that be possible, you ask? Well, I'm not sure that it is, but I've got a few special tricks up my sleeve. You'll just have to subscribe with notifications on if you want to find out. Thanks a ton for watching to the end of the video. Let me know in the comments if there are any other challenge runs you'd like to see me attempt, preferably ones that haven't been done yet. Video ideas in general are great too. Have a fantastic day. Until next time, folks.